All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our Trailblazer webinar today. My name is Cheryl O'Connor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Income Conductor, an innovative and award-winning retirement income planning technology. Joining me as my co-host today is Mark Butler, a consultant to wealth management and wealth tech firms and founder of Wealth Management GPT. Looks like spring is finally here, Mark.
We're trying to get there. We're slowly on our way. Typical spring teased us with a couple of nice days, and now cold, rainy, and I know you and Peter both said potential for snow in your area.
Yeah.
I'm ready to get past it.
I am as well. So just to set the stage for those of you attending your first Trailblazer webinar, the series highlights the people in our industry who are really forging new paths and developing new ways to achieve success while providing great outcomes for their clients. We welcome your questions, so please type them into the Q&A box, and we'll leave time at the end to address them. So it's my pleasure to welcome our Trailblazer today, Dr. Peter Lichtenberg, Director of the Institute of Gerontology and Professor of Psychology at Wayne State University. Peter received his PhD in 1986 and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in geriatric neuropsychology at the University of Virginia Medical School, where he was also on the faculty. He was one of the first board-certified clinical geropsychologists in the nation and has authored 7 books and over 200 scientific articles in that field. Peter has spent almost 40 years researching the impact of memory loss on financial capacity and financial exploitation in older adults, and is a nationally recognized expert in this area. Based on his research, he has developed a suite of tools that professionals can use to assess an individual's financial capacity and vulnerability and help protect them from exploitation. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much, Cheryl and Mark. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Such an interesting field. So maybe you can start out by sharing how you initially got interested in gerontology at such an early age.
Sure.
And also how you came to focus specifically on assessing the financial capacity of this age group.
Well, my mother remembered that at age 16, I told her I want to work with older people and I want to become a psychologist. So both have come true. And probably this thing that spurred me on was I had such wonderful grandparents and great aunts and uncles. I just loved spending time with them. And the more I got into this field, the more I loved it, more of the same. Just really enjoy spending time with older people and learning so much from them about their experiences. What the audience needs to know is that I'm a clinician researcher, so I still have a clinical practice. And I started out in geropsychology and geriatric neuropsychology, really coming to understand how to assess dementia. Not just delivering cognitive tests, but also how does it affect function? And one of the, of course, first functions that it affects is the ability to manage finances. And so that started my road. And there's so few of us clinical geropsychologists that you get sought out to do capacity assessments. And that really involves not only the ability to manage money, but the ability to make informed decisions about money. I'm not saying good decisions. We're allowed to make bad decisions, but they need to be informed decisions. So we need to be able to communicate the choices that we want to make and communicate understanding and appreciation of those choices. This is all tied into, the various vulnerabilities that a person can start to experience as they get older. So we talked about cognitive function or dementia, but also psychological vulnerabilities like depression, physical vulnerabilities like frailty and dependency on others. And all of those really start to make people a little bit more at risk for, and I wouldn't say any more at risk than younger people financial exploitation, but more at risk for financial exploitation that will cause financial hardship. So we know when you look at the numbers, older people and younger people might have very similar numbers in the number of reports to the Federal Trade Commission about exploitation. But if you look at the dollars that are lost, older people, and particularly those in their 80s, have just tremendous higher losses, which means they're getting repeatedly exploited. It's not all one fell swoop. And so, the more that I got involved in financial capacity assessment, and whether a person could manage those monies and make informed decisions, the more I kind of saw the dark side of it all, which was that somebody was exploiting them or trying to exploit them. And I realized I had to get educated in that whole world, and also came to realize that the tools that I needed in order to talk to the judges or attorneys or families didn't exist. And so with colleagues from across the country, we were able to create some new tools a little bit over a decade ago.
So can you talk a little bit about, where that exploitation is coming from? We hear a lot about, scams,
Yeah.
things like people getting phone calls and family members being impersonated, asking for cash and things like that. But I think that there is more exploitation within a family, a friends and family circle, than there are from, outside entities, correct?
It's now starting to even out.
Ah,
Fraud and scams are so prevalent that it's now starting to even out. It used to be 60% was from a family or friend and 40% from scams, but I think it's probably closer to 50-50 now. And so, both can be very, very difficult, of course, and they're a little bit different in terms of the dynamics of them. But it isn't just strangers that financially exploit older people. And sometimes, what we think of as financial entitlement, where an adult child feels entitled to their parents' money, seeing it, well, that's my inheritance. Mom's much more dependent on me than she used to be, so I'm just, using it early. Well, you and I know that is theft, but that's really, kind of the problem that can show itself. Or when somebody becomes one of the trusted advocate and doesn't have really anybody watching over them, they can start to get into areas where they're using funds for their own purposes and not on behalf of the older person.
And I know we've heard those stories. We've all heard those stories before where people are taking advantage. And I shared with you and Cheryl when we were prepping just, some of what I see in the community where people are getting ripped off and it's listed on the police blotter. Obviously, it's happening a lot more than what's just getting reported. But I know, Peter, you've done some research into, people's capacity to manage their financial resources and tied to memory loss. And you shared a lot of that with Cheryl and I. Can you share a little bit about that with our audience?
Yeah, so after we assessed decision making and after we assessed kind of exploitation and the link between those two, we said, well, and how does early memory loss influence the ability to manage one's funds? And so we started the wallet study, and it took us 3 years to collect the data. 150 people gave us access to 12 months of their checking statements, for which they were the primary
mhm.
user. So we really were very careful about our selection criteria. They had to be the ones that were using that account, not just their name on it. And what we found, of course, was even again more of that intersection that the and we're just rolling out these data into published papers and presentations now. As a matter of fact, uh, just had an acceptance from the International Alzheimer's Conference in Philadelphia
Hmm,
this summer. So we're excited about being able to present that. But
great.
that intersection of early memory loss with heightened both excessive spending, meaning spending well beyond what they had budgeted for. We got all of their income, we got all of the distributions that they were taking. You know, we found out what their goals were, and people with memory loss uh, averaged about 19% excessive spending. Uh, People without memory loss, about 10%, so it was almost double. But when you looked then at people with early memory loss and exploitation, which is one of kind of those risk indicators for excessive spending, it was much higher
Hmm.
in those who had early memory loss. So you're starting to see that how the decision making intersects with the financial management and
Mm-hmm.
early memory loss to result also in exploitation.
So what are some of the triggers that a financial professional and advisor working with an older client, what are some of those signs that somebody might be experiencing early memory loss? What should they be looking for?
Yeah, I think there's three things that you can do. One is as a matter of routine, especially as somebody gets older, um, when you meet with them, say, over the past year, or if you met with them 6 months ago, have you found your memory or problem-solving abilities to be less reliable? So self-report sometimes can be very important. As a matter of fact, our study showed that even when people were, quote, cognitively normal, but they felt like they perceived they were having memory loss, they were the ones who were quite vulnerable. So asking directly on a matter of routine, and it's, just kind of work it into your routine questions. Number two, you hit the right word, Cheryl, triggers. So people who can't remember their appointment, they call back a few times, or they get lost on the way to the office when they never have before, or they didn't fill out the paperwork when they always did. Those kinds of things are really low-hanging fruit triggers that, hey, there may be some memory loss problems.
Mhm.
Then number three, if they do have a trusted other and they give permission, you can always get their input. There are some easy questions to ask about, is the person repeating themselves often? Is their personality changed at all? When we think about dementia, we think not only about cognitive things like memory and problem solving, but also personality, like irritability, defensiveness, withdrawal, and function, like driving and finances and medications
Mm-hmm.
as the top three.
And Peter, do you find that people that are experiencing memory loss, do you find that they have awareness of it, and maybe that's the easy part, maybe the harder part is, are they willing to admit it?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's tricky. Some cases, just assess somebody um, this weekend who uh, has clear memory loss, really powerful, functioning relatively well, but really, and totally denies it, is not aware of it. And we call that anosognosia, a lack of awareness of deficit. It can be part of the early memory loss syndrome. Other people are acutely aware that their memory or problem solving abilities are changing. And what you touched on, Mark, is okay, then what? What are people willing to do to compensate for that? Well, it's not so bad. I mean, there have been a lot of studies when doctors tell the uh, person with dementia what their diagnosis is, and then the follow-up. Yes, he told me I had a diagnosis, but he also told me it wasn't so bad.
Mhm.
So a totally rewrite of kind of what was said, and it's part of that trying to protect oneself by minimizing what those deficits mean, and that's a tricky part, as you say.
Yeah, and sort of creating your own sort of alternative reality world that, hey, it's okay, it's not that big a deal, and probably convincing themselves that is the case.
Yeah, and one of the really tricky parts for an emerging dementia can be when people get suspicious. It's not uncommon. And what they're going to be suspicious of are people who they're closest to,
Mhm.
including their advisors. all of a sudden, these great relationships, and then you're, saying, hey, maybe you need to get this checked out or that checked out. Well, he or she just wants to get access to more of my money.
Yeah.
So just have to keep a third ear out for that. And when you see that, you know that you're probably into something, pretty serious. And
Yeah.
beyond it, you might have thought it was really early, but it may be beyond that.
Yeah.
Dementia is so difficult to recognize because, it's so insidious. Something
Mhm.
like Alzheimer's disease, as opposed to something like a stroke, for example.
Hmm.
It's so insidious, and well, did they just forget the name of, my name today, or are they having real problems? So, yeah, not easy to to judge.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think one of the things that our industry could get better at is, our tools and our strategies that we use with older adults to communicate financial concepts. I know, Income Conductor is a technology that focuses on retirement income planning. So our advisors are working with this demographic day in and day out. And we our goal is to provide a very clear, simple, understandable plan with no, you know, financial jargon that would confuse the client. So the first step is them actually understanding what you're presenting to them, so they have a level of comfort, right, and confidence that they understand what's going on, and then the ability to manage that plan moving forward with very clear data versus probability of success, which probabilities are very confusing to most of us. Never mind if you're aging and your financial acuity is declining. So we put a lot of stock in that. I think it's very important for advisors to speak to the level of understanding of their client, right? Especially older adults.
I think it's really important to have clients tell you what it is that you told them or how they heard it,
Hmm.
Uh,
as opposed to allowing them just to nod their head and say, thank you.
mhm.
Thank you,
Mm.
Cheryl. Yes, that's right. Because that's how people cope, is just by the pragmatics of communication are intact. So to help you identify is when somebody really can't follow what you're saying because it's new information, and their cognitive problem is just interrupting that ability to track it and parrot it back to you in a way that conveys an understanding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great tip.
That is a great tip. That's really interesting. Peter, we usually wait till the end for questions, but we had a good one come in from a frequent listener, and his question is, what signs should we as service providers, and in this case, this person owns a TAMP platform, a managed money platform. What signs should we as service providers look for with clients referred to us by financial advisors?
Um, so a few indices that we've been looking at in terms of problem with financial management is anytime somebody gets overdrawn, that,
Mm.
that's a pretty high signal, to look into that further. People who are helping others on a regular basis, and maybe it's beyond what they've reported that they're doing. They're not really able to track actually how much they're helping someone else financially on a regular basis. And somebody who's all of a sudden or continues to spend really in excess of one category.
Hmm.
Mm.
The the classics, and we saw this actually in our data, of course, are the home shopping network or Amazon or um, uh, casinos or anything like that, or even donations where people start to lose track of how much they're donating to a
Yeah,
particular charity, and they've donated three or four times the amount that they expected or
Mm.
right.
planned to donate, just because they keep getting things in the mail.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things to really kind of look at. as kind of high indicators.
It's a great question. Yeah. So tell us a little bit. I know we're starting to run out of time. Tell us more about the tools that you've developed for professionals. I know financial advisors do have access to them. I actually went through the process and got certified on your financial decision tracker tool. But can you talk about the whole suite and how it's used?
Absolutely. And thank you for going through it and taking our training. Anybody can get an account. Anybody can take our training, get certified, no charge to, and use our platform at no charge to professionals. We have about 350 financial professionals that have gotten trained, certified on our tools. There's two tools really that have emerged, I think, that are particularly useful for financial advisors. One is before there's any problem, a financial vulnerability survey. This is a 17-item questionnaire. It will give you a sense, and it's kind of been validated against people who become exploited versus those who are not. And so we've validated it and cross-validated it and are finding that it's very linked to the things that you would expect, like early memory loss and living alone. And this will give you a sense of people's heightened risk for exploitation. But not only that, you'll get a sense of where they're feeling vulnerable. Are they having psychological vulnerability around money? Are they upset about the way they're managing their money? Or are they having some relationship strain and worry about other people infringing on their money? So that tool, I think, is a good one before there's ever any problem, maybe at the outset.
Mhm.
The second one, though, is when you are concerned about somebody's ability to make a decision or set of financial decisions, and it's the financial decision tracker. It's a 10-item tool, which really is assessing informed decision making. And the stems really ask questions like, what's the decision you're making? How much risk is there to you financially? What are your financial goals with this? Um, who is this your idea or somebody else's? And the what this is tapping into is, can the person identify choice, understanding, appreciation, and can they reason or have a rationale for that choice? Those are the elements of informed decision making. And those really permeate throughout all of our laws about contracts and guardianship and gifts and so forth. And I think this helps advisors kind of see, well, how serious are the decision-making deficits. And one of the things that's nice about the tool, when we first started creating it, and we showed it to our panel, was kind of open-ended, semi-structured question. They said, we should make this multiple choice. And 7 of those 10 items, made them all multiple choice. 7 of those can actually be quantitatively scored, and we have a risk scoring system that's been validated and cross-validated as well. So we've had over 2,500 trackers given. Our research has included over 1,500 of those, and it can be a useful tool for financial advisors.
And what are some of the red flags that come up in the decision tracker? What would be an answer that would, make you question that person's ability to
Yeah,
assess the impact?
sure. So who benefits most from this financial decision? And a lot of times the older person will say, well, I do. You're about to, give all this money to somebody else. Sure, it makes you feel good, but the other person is the one that actually is benefiting most. How much risk is involved in this financial decision? Well, none, But you may say, wow, this is all of a sudden they want to do something that's very risky. So those are a couple of the questions that really get at it, but also, what impact will this have on your finances? No impact at all. Is it going to make you lose money? Are you going to make money?
Mhm.
That kind of thing. So several of those questions are like that, and the discrepancy between what's accurate and what the older person says is where you see the lack of informed decision making.
Interesting. The board is lighting up with some good questions here. So Andrew is asking, where can we access these tools?
So olderadultnestegg.com is our website. Olderadultnestegg, all one word, .com. Probably need a better name, but that's what we came up with years ago before we really realized that we'd actually really create a website that would work. So,
No,
but
it's
yes,
good. It's good. And all the tools are right off
olderadultnestegg.com.
of there, right, Peter?
Yes. So there's a professional landing page for professionals. The tools are right off of there. It'll walk you through it. And the training is narrated and self-paced. And so that's great. And you do an overview and then you do the tracker, take you about 20 to 30 minutes.
Great.
And it's
And then,
all free of charge.
All
yeah,
free of charge.
that's a great point. And a question from Walt. Peter, how much does it matter if you notice a client substituting words for common items? For example, I once had a client who couldn't remember the word table, so she said that thing you put your coffee cup on instead as a workaround. A few years later, she was diagnosed with dementia.
Yes.
Really, really
Thank
interesting.
you. Great question. It's called a semantic paraphasia. In other words, you know the meaning of what the item is, but you can't locate the word for the item. And actually, word finding tests are part of our dementia evaluation. And so she probably was, when you noted that, and she probably was in the period of early memory decline and problem solving. And then it progressed. So language disorders can be part of the early signs.
Great questions. Thanks, Walt. Thanks, Andrew. Hey, Peter, just I'm curious, and we didn't talk about this at all when we got together prior to the session, but can it work the other way? So older adults that have really good memory, um, do you find that they're not as, instead of excess spending, they're doing exactly the opposite. They're not spending when they should be spending.
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
so what you've got is and about 15+% of older adults don't have any cognitive change at all. None. They are really, and most people have some modest changes, but uh, those who don't have any changes, if they've been savers all their life, they're going to continue to save. That's just the pattern that they're in, and that's their mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah, my partner Phil calls it permission to spend. And that's the best thing an advisor can give their clients in retirement is, make them confident that they can enjoy their savings and the last phase of their life.
Right.
So any takeaways, just tips on if they do this assessment with their clients, and there are some red flags that come up, there are some risks.
Yeah.
What are the next steps that you would advise they take with a client or, with some outside entity?
All of us that provide services to older people are part of a healthcare team, a geriatric team of all kinds of services.
Yeah.
And we need to know, but it's virtual, and we don't know who the other team members are. So we need to establish relationships in our communities with a geriatric medicine physician, nurse practitioner, uh, case manager, home health type of company. Why? Because when you are noticing things, you're going to be like, well, who do I turn to?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we want to turn to people we have trusted relationships with as a professional. And so if your clientele have a significant proportion of older people, it really is a good first step to get to know those team members that are invisible to you now. And then you can talk with your client about, getting things checked out when you see some signs.
Great advice. Well, the half hour went way too quickly, as it always does when we're talking with Trailblazers, Mark. So
Exactly.
we just want to thank you so much, Peter, for joining us and sharing your research and all the great stuff you've done in this area to really help older adults be safe and get the help that they need. And again, your website is olderadultnestegg.com, all one word. So I hope that our attendees go out and check out your excellent tools and resources.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Peter. We've already gotten a lot of good feedback. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.